it's Esme, and for today's video I thought I would do another one from my beginners series, which is how to groom your horse. So I'm going to be talking through all of my grooming brushes, what they're called, what they're used for, and how you use them. So here I have a slightly dirty Casper today. Usually every single morning when I get him up from the field, his head, his legs, basically everywhere that his rug doesn't cover is absolutely plastered in mud. The one day I decide to do a grooming video, he decides not to roll. So his head isn't too bad. It's a little bit yellow stained in places, but at least it's not plastered with mud. So that's going to make my life a little bit easier today. Also with today's video, I thought I would add in some tips and tricks for keeping your grey horses looking more white and less yellow or brown, because that's the colour you tend to end up looking with all the mud and stable stains, especially in the winter. It's not a good look, is it, Casper? So I've got a few hints and tips that I'll give. And also, if you already know how to groom a horse, I thought this would be a fun and satisfying video, because it's so nice to see a horse that's so dirty and then magically then become nice and clean, because I know you guys love my cleaning videos. So anyway, the first thing I thought I'd talk about is why grooming is so important. Well, obviously it gets your horse looking nice and pretty and clean, but it's also really good for a welfare point of view. It's good to make sure that they don't have any skin irritations. This is something that Mickey has quite often, so when I'm grooming him, it's really good to check over to see if he has any patches that are a little bit scaly that I might need to moisturize. It's also good to check for any cuts that they might have gotten in the field, and it's also good to see if there's any areas on them that are hot, that might be swollen, where they might have been maybe kicked in the field or injured. And it's really good to be able to just check your horse over, and when you've done this multiple times and get to know your horse, you'll really be able to see very quickly if something's different or something's wrong. My biggest tip I'd say in the winter for keeping your horse clean, if they are turned out and go out on the field, is wearing a rug. So today is actually quite a mild day, it's not too chilly. I've just got a t-shirt and a light jacket on. So Casper just has a New Zealand on at the moment because it really is quite mild. So even in the spring we have a lot of rain. I just like to pop this on. It's just like a rain sheet really, so it doesn't have any fillings. So even when it is a little bit warmer outside, they won't get really hot, and it also just keeps them dry. So I'm going to take this off and we're going to have a little look, see what's underneath, because sometimes it's not as good as you think it's going to be, because sometimes, I don't know how, but Casper gets mud underneath his rug. Like here there's a little bit that I must have missed the other day when I groomed him, because we had a bit of a quick groom yesterday. And then especially where his legs are, his legs probably get the most muddy. So let's see what we have. Oh, you're not looking too bad, Casper, you're not looking too bad, but there are some improvements we need to make. My other tips for keeping a horse clean in the winter is to actually clip them. My horses, especially Casper, because he's a Connemara, so he's a native breed, he gets very hairy, very fluffy in the winter, and when that hair gets wet and gets muddy, it just doesn't really dry off on the top sort of layer. So I find clipping him helps me a lot, especially down here. He likes to get so many stable stains, so it means that I can wash him with some warm water and then quickly dry him off, and then he dries so much quicker because he has a very smaller coat because he's clipped. His clip is growing out a little bit, but because it's winter I'm not going to bother re-clipping him until we need to. So he's a tiny bit fluffy, but he's so much better than he would have been if he wasn't clipped. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to wash off his legs with the hose pipe. Obviously if it's the summer or the spring and your horse's legs aren't muddy, you won't need to do this, but I'm going to, because it's also good to check if he still has his shoes on, because especially with the mud, sometimes the mud likes to sort of just pull their shoes off. So I can't actually see his shoes right now, so I'm gonna have to check if they're still on, Casper. Hey? He looks completely asleep. Are you awake? Oh, I love you. Alright, so I have now tied Casper up, so he's all ready for me to wash off his hooves. So here I have the hose pipe. Because it is cold water, it doesn't matter too much because it is just going to be on his hooves, so he's not going to get absolutely freezing cold from the cold water. But obviously if you're going to do a full body wash, it's quite nice to use warmer water instead. So Casper is so good at having his hooves washed. He literally just stands there. He's so good. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do when grooming Casper is actually pick out his hooves. So I have actually two different types of hoof pick here. This one is a 2-in-1, so you've got the hoof brush that you can use for brushing out their hooves, and then also have the little pick at the top here. Personally, I actually quite like to use a hoof pick on its own, and then this isn't actually a proper hoof brush. This is a washing up scrubbing brush. This is a little hack if you like. I like to use these just because they are so much bigger. The bristles are pretty hard as well, so it's really good at getting the tough mud that doesn't want to come off their hooves, especially if it's dried on as well. So that's what I'm going to be using. So yeah, if you want to use something bigger, use the washing up brush. Alright, so when picking up your horse's hooves, what I like to do is have a little feel of his leg, make sure there aren't any lumps or bumps, make sure there isn't any heat or anything different. And usually when I do this, he's quite good and he picks it up straight away. He didn't then. So I'll do it again. Casper, this one. Good boy. Okay, so Casper can be a little bit naughty sometimes. There we go. Excuse me, mister. But anyway, what I like to do is when you're picking out the horse's hooves on the left, you hold it with your left hand and pick out with your right hand. And then on the other side, you hold the hoof with your right hand and then pick out with your left hand. It feels a little bit strange when you first get used to it because obviously I'm right-handed, so this feels more natural for me to pick it out with my right hand. That is the proper way you're supposed to do it, but honestly, whatever works best for you. So there we go. Just make sure all the mud's gone. So this area here is called the frog. So that bit you do not pick out, that is actually part of their hoof. You just want to get rid of all the mud that's on the sole. As you can see, Casper is due the farrier. He needs some new shoes soon because they are very worn away. We've done a lot of hacking recently on the road. There we go, just brush away the mud. And then your horse's hoof is picked out. So this is really good to check for any stones that are in there. Also check that their shoes are nice and tight on. You can also check the condition of the shoes. So yes, Casper does need the farrier soon. And also you don't want any stones to be in there because that'll be very uncomfortable for your horse, so you can just pick them out. And yeah, there we go. Good boy. Time to do the rest. All right, so here is another one, just getting rid of all of the mud. There's quite a few stones in here as well because we've been doing a bit of hacking. I try and pick out his hooves after hacking, but had to lead him up the other day on the track. So always pick down away from you. And then got my brush again and brush it out. All right, so this is what my hands look like after picking out Casper's hooves. As you can see, it's a bit of a mucky job, but at least I know that Casper still has all of his shoes on and his hooves are nicely picked out. Alright, so this is actually my fancy grooming kit. This is the one that I take to shows, or when the horses go out in the van, I take this one. So Casper was actually the last horse I took out in the van, so they are a little bit dirty because he was the last horse I used them on. Anyway, so all of my horses actually have their own grooming kit, so I have 4 in total, and this is just for hygiene reasons. It's nice to have your own brushes for your own horse. If not, if you're using the same brush on multiple horses, it's just not the best, especially with Mickey having his sensitive skin and his skin conditions. It wouldn't be very nice using that on Joey or Casper. So anyway, I thought I would do a little bit of a grooming box tour because I have quite a few brushes in here. So what are we going to use first on Casper? So first I'm actually going to be using a curry comb. There are lots of different types of curry comb. So this is a plastic curry comb. I love these ones. This is the Lemieux Wizard brush, I believe. And then I have another one here. This is a rubber curry comb. This also has like little massage bits on, which I love, especially for molting season. This is really useful. And even after rides, I just love to give them a bit of a massage with this. I'll pop that back in. And then, where is the last one? Here we have another rubber curry comb. This one just has smaller little spikes on it, which are nice and soft. Like I can use this on my fingers. But this again is great for getting mud off. But today I'm going to be using my plastic one just because this is personally my favorite, and I'm going to be using this to get all of the dry mud off Casper. Personally, my sort of tip for cleaning grey horses or just any coloured horses is if the mud's wet, use water to get it off. If the mud's dry, use a brush to get it off. Because if you try to get wet mud off a horse with a brush, then it's not really going to work much. Like, you are going to get a bit off, but it's going to get your brushes absolutely horrible, and also it's just going to spread the mud around. It's just not the best. So with dry mud like this, as you can see, it comes in little clumps. I like to use a plastic curry comb, and it just gets it off really easily. I do try to be quite gentle on my horse's legs with this, but it is, again, quite soft, like I can bang it against my hand and things. Again, Casper likes to get a lot of these little mud clumps on his tummy, so I'm just going to very gently go down here. Also, when you're grooming your horse, never kneel, because if your horse spooks or jumps at something, they might land on you. So make sure that you just crouch instead, so it means you can quickly jump out of the way in case your horse does decide to move. So I'm just going to finish off doing his legs. When I wash his legs off, I usually try not to go above the knee. I usually go around up to here, just where the mud goes, because I don't want his legs to get too wet, especially if I'm putting boots on him later, if I'm tacking him up or something. Here he's got a little bit of mud here, especially on his back legs. So next I have my rubber curry comb, and I'm going to be using this in circular motions on Casper. So it's always good when you're brushing them to start at the head end and then go down to the tail, because this means that you're brushing all of the sort of dirt in one direction rather than it going everywhere. Also, it then goes in the same direction as the horse's coat. So I'm going to be using this in a circular motion all over him, and what this does is it actually lifts up all of the dirt that's stuck in the coat. Obviously Casper's clipped, so there isn't too much, and he's also rugged, but here you can see in this area where he isn't clipped, a lot of dirt and dust is really coming up here. Also, you have to be quite sensitive on their back when using this, just because you don't want to be putting loads of pressure on their like spine area, so just make sure you're a little bit gentle in those areas. I like to be a little bit more rough on his tummy, just because that's where it's usually absolutely filthy, because all the mud from his legs splatter up there. This is also really fun to use on their butt, because as you can see, look, he looks clean, but there's actually quite a lot of dirt coming up. All the dead skin and grime. It really does like to show itself when you do this. Next, I'm going to be using a dandy brush. So this is a brush that has thicker bristles. They most commonly look a little bit more like this. Because of these brushes, you have a bit more of a flicking motion. So this is to flick off all of the dust and dirt. So you use a dandy brush if your horse is kept out in the field, but if your horse is kept in a stable, then you use a body brush instead. So this is often a lot softer, and the reason why body brushes, like the main difference between them, is because body brushes actually remove all of the grease and the dirt and the oils in your horse's coat, which is good to keep in if your horse is kept in the field, because then it protects them a little bit more. But if you're in a stable, it doesn't matter as much. So because Casper is kept in the field, I'm going to be using my dandy brush. Also with me here, I have a metal curry comb. This is a 2-in-1 because it can also be used as a sweat scraper, which is great when you wash your horse because it gets all of the water off. But today I'm actually going to be using it with my dandy brush, because what you do is you go like this and you flick all of the dust away. So this basically kind of cleans the brush. So every few sort of flicks that you do when grooming, you can flick off all of the dust, just so then you're using a clean-ish brush. So here I'm just flicking up all of the dust that we originally got up to the surface using the curry comb. Next, I'm going to be using my face brush, which is very easy to tell which one it is because it's nice and soft and it's also very small as well. But if you don't have a face brush, then you can also use a body brush on them too, because it's nice and soft. It's just a little bit bigger, so it's a bit more difficult to get in all the nooks and crannies and areas on their face. So anyway, time to give Caspy's face a bit of a brush. When brushing a horse's face, a little hack I have is to actually undo this latch here. So what it means is that I can actually get under here a lot easier when grooming his face. I try to be as gentle as I possibly can, and Casper sometimes looks like he's gonna fall asleep when I do this. He finds it really relaxing. He's not the biggest fan of having his ears brushed or touched, are you, mate? When we first got him, he was really head shy and wouldn't let me touch his face or brush his face at all. He's still a little bit more sensitive, but we're getting there. Hey, Casper. Brushing a horse's face is actually probably one of the most important places that you need to groom, especially if you're going to tack up and ride them. And this is because you don't want it to be all muddy and horrible and dusty. Where the tack goes, obviously the bridle goes on the horse's head and also the saddle goes on their back. So those are the two key areas that you have to make sure are nice and clean before you tack up. If not, your horse is going to get some rubs and that's not going to be very comfortable for you, is it? So I'm going to make sure he's nice and clean. Good boy. Next I have my mane and tail brush, which is pretty self-explanatory. You use it on the mane and the tail. So a little top tip I have is if you are grooming your mane and tail, I would recommend using some mane and tail conditioner or detangler, and this is really good because when you put it in the mane, it just makes it so much easier to brush, especially if your horse's mane and tail is so thick like Casper's. I swear Casper has the amount of hair on his tail as like 3 horses. And he also always likes to bring in shavings in his tail, leaves, everything. Also, if you are planning on plaiting your horse or braiding your horse before a show, I would recommend not using mane and tail detangler because that makes your horse's mane and tail really slippery. So if you try to plait them or braid them, then they're more likely to fall out. So don't do that. Also, it's good to have a slightly greasy mane when you're plaiting as well, so they stick better. You don't want a nice clean one, again, because they're more likely to, the braids to come out. So anyway, I'm going to spray his mane and tail and give that a little bit of a brush. Also, if your horse has a really thin mane and tail, it's not very good to brush them every single time you groom, because if not, that's going to be pulling out bits of hair and it's just going to make it thinner and thinner. I'd recommend only doing that on special occasions, but because Casper's is so thick, I just do it as often as I want. Good boy. Casper gets a little bit sensitive with spray, so he did put his ears back at me. Hey, you're not the biggest fan, are you? But he's a lot better with it now. When we first got him, he was not the biggest fan, but he's a lot better now. He tolerates it now, let's say that. So, because Casper has quite a short mane, it's quite easy to brush through. I've also tried to thin it out as much as possible, but it's grown quite a lot since then, so I might need to give you a little bit of a mane neaten up at some point, hey Casper. But because it's not too knotty, I managed to brush it quite easily. But if your horse has a longer, knottier mane, it's always good to start off at the bottom and then gradually work your way up. That's the best way to try not to rip as many hairs out as possible. But yeah, Casper, because he's a native and he's a Connemara, I don't know if it's a Connemara thing or if it's just a Casper thing, but he has quite a curly mane, which looks quite funny. When it is shorter and thinner, you don't notice it as much, but when he used to have a really long mane down to here, it was so wavy and curly, and you can kind of see that coming back a little bit now, but it's just a lot easier to maintain during the winter when it's a bit shorter. I'm sorry about the pun, I'm so sorry. Let's do your forelock too, mate. There we go. Now it is tail time, and Casper's tail is absolutely disgusting, so I think today I might actually give it a bit of a wash. I am going to brush it first and show you how I brush it. When Casper's mane and tail is really dirty, I don't really like to use mane and tail detangler on it, just because I find that it makes all the dirt sort of stick to it a little bit more, and it just ends up his mane looking kind of browny yellow, which isn't the best when he's supposed to look grey. But I am going to use it just because I need to get these knots out, and it is impossible without a little bit of the mane and tail detangler. But I'm going to try and just use it on the top parts of his tail, which are a little bit cleaner. So anyway, I like to brush Casper's tail in sections. It's always best to start at the bottom again if you don't want to rip too many of the hairs out. So I just get like a little clump like this, which is absolutely horrible. It's got so much mud in, and I just gently try and do the ends and gradually work my way up. This usually takes me quite a while because his tail is so thick. He's a little bit of a Rapunzel horse. Yeah, as you can see, I have to be a little bit violent when I'm brushing him. I have to do it quite hard because if not, the knots just don't come out. So there we go. We have one section with the knots removed, and then slowly I will grab more and more pieces of his tail and bring it into my de-knotting clump. Also, when you're grooming your horse's tail, it's always good to stand to the side in case they get a little bit agitated, or you brush a knot out and they're not the biggest fan of that. They can, it depends on your horse's temperament, they can kick out. Obviously Casper I've had for almost 7 years now, so I know him really well, and he's not one that tends to kick. But it's always best to be safe than sorry. Usually if a horse is going to kick, Casper does a few warning signs, like he pins his ears back at me, or he starts stamping his hooves to tell me, hey mate, I'm not happy. But no, it would be very out of character for him to kick, but especially if you're grooming a horse that you don't know very well, or just in case, it's always good to stand to the side because you never know, they might decide to swing a hoof at you. Now, if you own a horse that isn't a grey, you have probably now finished. Hello, Casper. You interested in what I've got here in my hands? Because if you do own a grey horse, then you'll need a lot of this. For everyone wondering how much shampoo I have quite a few of these. Olivia very kindly gave me their Brights White shampoo. So if you have a grey horse, I'd recommend using a blue or purple shampoo. This is kind of like a violet-y colour, which is great because this removes all of the yellow stains. So because it is the winter, I don't want to give Casper a full wash because he might get a little bit chilly. Here I actually have a bucket of warm water that I've got from the house. So very nice to you, Casper. It's nice and warm for you. So what I find is Casper has little patches of stable stains that he gets in the stables. So basically a bit of poo and wee that he's been sitting in or lying down in overnight. Yes, I know I'm embarrassing you. So anyway, he's not too bad. He's got a tiny bit on his face. It's usually on his legs, so this upper leg here, he's got some. Back here, he's got a massive patch. It's always on their back legs here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a little bit of shampoo, a little bit of water, put it on a sponge, give him a wash off, rinse it off, dry him off, and then hopefully by then he'll be looking a bit cleaner. Meep. Lastly, I'm just going to give his tail a bit of a rinse. Obviously, this is not something I do every day in my grooming routine, but because, you know, this is also how I keep my grey horses clean, I don't want you guys to be like, oh, his tail's dirty, you've missed a spot, that kind of thing, because I want the after of today's video for him to be looking sparkling clean and white. As you can see, I've rinsed it a few times now. We're not getting too many brown bubbles. Usually when you get the brown bubbles, you know that you're cleaning it quite well because you're actually getting the dirt off. We're getting there. I don't think it will be perfectly white. I might have to brush it, clean it a few times to get it to that stage, but we're not doing any shows or competitions at the moment, and he's enjoying very much just being out in the field and being a bog monster. Alright guys, because Casper has been so good, I'm just going to give him some treats. Also grooming, Casper absolutely loves. Sometimes I feel like he gets dirty on purpose just so I spend a long session grooming him, because it's great for bonding as well, especially if you have a new horse or a horse that you're getting to know. Grooming is great for that. So anyway, Casper is now clean. Obviously I don't do the whole tail washing, full on leg wash with him every time I groom him, because if not, that would take me for ages. I only really do that if I'm going to be doing like a photo shoot or something and I want him looking perfectly clean, or if I'm going to like a competition or something like that. So anyway, yeah, sometimes if he just has like a small little stain maybe on his neck, I'll use a stain remover. a horsey stain remover. Don't use like your washing up stain removers. Don't use that. Use a horsey one. You can buy them from most tack shops. I just buy whatever one my tack shop has. They all really do the same job. So I just spray that on his neck or wherever the dirty patch is, wipe it off and then rinse it off with some water afterwards and dry him off. That's great if you don't want to have to get a whole bucket of water and shampoo and things. So anyway guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Now Casper is looking sparkling clean, or as clean as I can possibly get him for being in the middle of winter and me not wanting him to get too cold or to do a full bath. You really want that treat. So anyway guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you're new or have not done so already, please like and subscribe. It really does help me out and I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below what other beginner series videos you would like to see. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Oh, you were such a good boy. Such a good boy, yes. Yeah, should we do some riding now? Yeah? Thank you.